Okay, let's get going. If I can ask everybody to take a seat. And actually, if your French isn't too advanced, if I could suggest that you take a translation set, please, because we're going to have one of our panelists will be doing their intervention in French. So please do just grab a headset if you need one. Okay, let's get going then. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this session. We are going to be addressing the question as to how will we finance the transition of the real estate sector while bringing all stakeholders along on that journey. My name is Sarah Kemmett. I work with the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative. And we are a partnership between the United Nations and the private sector, banks, insurers, asset owners, investors, etc. So just to say a few words of introduction, the real estate sector has many challenges. It is diverse and fragmented, with buildings of all different sizes, uses, ownership, occupation, and construction type. And there's a whole host of stakeholders involved in this value chain, from owners to tenants, building standards and code setters, fiscal policy makers, architects, buildings materials producers, and the builders and developers themselves, of course. Buildings are not just isolated units. They are part of villages, towns, cities that are linked by transport, infrastructure, and hydrology. And decarbonising this sector is really vital to the success of averting the climate crisis. But we know that we're not seeing sufficient progress on a pathway to 1.5. In my role, I lead the Secretariat of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which is a group of over 140 banks committed to aligning portfolios to 1.5. And one of the conversations that I'm having more and more with the members are really focused around their concerns about their ability to meet science-based decarbonisation targets for this sector. And even in developed countries, they're not seeing the policy environment that's going to enable this to happen. So in this event, what we want to do is look at financing flows to decarbonise the building sector through 6 different dimensions. So firstly, there's the flow of financing for new build on the one hand, and to decarbonise the existing stock on the other hand. Second, for new build, there's a need to construct with low carbon materials, to have low embodied emissions, and also the need for the design of the buildings to be net zero for operations, including heating and cooling requirements. Third, we've got a huge difference between residential and commercial real estate, where really different approaches are required. Fourthly, there's various different roles on strategies for public finance and private finance. Fifth, there's a need for climate mitigation and resilience, where financing can sometimes kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but sometimes different approaches need to be taken. And lastly, there are distinct situations for developed countries and emerging economies and less developed countries, and there are different financing solutions needed for each. So beside all of those considerations, which are far from simple in themselves, most importantly, we really need to bring all stakeholders along on this journey for the transition to happen. So it has to be acceptable for a large number of different categories of stakeholders. But stakeholders is such a bland term, isn't it? What we're really talking about is people's homes, their places of work, their livelihoods. And the policies and actions that are taken to achieve the decarbonisation have to make sense and give benefits to them. But there are real issues around who pays, perceptions of fairness and justice. And for corporates, it's not going to happen unless it makes financial sense. So we have a great lineup of experts today. And in our first panel, we're going to be looking at the bigger picture for the building sector as a whole, and also emphasis on advanced economies. And in the second panel, our our speakers will be focusing more on emerging markets and with a focus on Africa. So with that, I would like to invite to the stage our first panel. So firstly, Nick Mabey, who is the founder and co-CEO of E3G. Ella Etienne Denoy, who is the head of ESG for business development and innovation for continental Europe with CBRE. Lutz Morgenstern, who's head of division within the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action for Germany. And Ronan Dantec, the French senator and president of Climate Change. Thank you so much. Okay, so Nick, I would really like to start with you. E3G is a think tank and gives lots of thought leadership on both sustainable finance and real estate. Could you tell us about how you see the current state of play on finance for the building sector to align to the Paris Agreement? And secondly, where does policy really need to go further? And thirdly, how do we bring the homeowners and landlords along this journey together?
Well, thanks so much. I'm not sure I'm going to get through all of that in 4 minutes. I might do the first two, and then I'll talk about one special stakeholder at the end. Is neither a resident or a landowner. So thanks very much. Maybe I run a think tank. We work across Europe and globally, very much on deep decarbonisation, but also finance, geopolitics, trade. So I'm going to bring it up a bit to start. And think about that state of play at the top of the tree. I mean, again, finance is there in this sector, but it's not flowing to the right things. You know, the numbers we look at, $12 trillion of transactions a year in property, nearly $5 trillion invested in buildings, but out of that only around 0.25 invested in efficiency when we need to be at least doubling that run rate if we're going to get to where we need to go in the existing building sector, while all the rest of the investment needs to go very quickly and at least 5 to 10 years to zero carbon buildings if we're going to keep on track with Paris. And a number that did surprise me, I suppose it shouldn't be, we're doubling floor space to 2050 globally, but the speed of floor space expanding is increasing energy use 5 times faster than we're reducing with energy efficiency. So we're on a treadmill going the wrong way. And if we delay activity in this space for another 10 years, and I've worked on this for 30 years, so that's certainly credible, the bill's around 2.4 trillion in increased energy demand for heating and cooling, which people shouldn't have to pay. So that need for systemic scaling and moving of market transformations, and I think, again, it's moving the scale up from thinking about transactions and instruments and policies to market transformations is so critical, particularly, and again, this is the hard piece the next panel will look at, in Africa and South Asia, where so much of the investment is going to happen in new build, let alone trying to get the retrofit in the richer countries where we particularly work. But I think there is an opportunity in 2025 in particular that those issues of scale and moving forward are there on the big political table. So unfortunately, at the moment, buildings are not in my conversations with climate diplomats and leaders' offices about the 2025 ambition moment around Paris, but they should be. Countries are going to raise their national determined contributions, and there is a huge amount of very high level, very politically supported, particularly by the French president, work on making the finance system give confidence that those NDCs can be ambitious. So if you want to put buildings at the heart of that, and they should be, we need to show how they're going to be financed through the multilateral development bank system, through the private sector, etc. But to be honest, compared to 18 months ago, the political space for that and the interest in that is around 50 times larger than it was for the previous decade. So there is a huge opportunity for change with ideas that work at a scale to what they're doing. But the problem is, at the moment, there's a lack of understanding, particularly, to be honest, in the climate sector, of how resilient and efficient buildings are part of the global politics of climate change and the critical part of the transition. And that's incredibly important, let alone in the benefits of energy security, resilience. So I think that's where we need to make the case moving forward and make efficient buildings much more known and understood. And I know everybody here knows and understands it, but I'm just telling you they do not. In the people who are making the big decisions about what they're going to ask other countries to do, up to 2035, because this is what the NDCs, those plans will set path dependencies for a long time. If they don't set path dependencies on buildings, they won't work. And we're not saying that loud enough. So it's really critical. So what do we think is needed to address that? Firstly, a few ideas. We think it's incredibly important for governments not just to say, put buildings in your nationally determined contribution, because that can just be a consultant writing something. We need that to link to sectoral transition and investment plans that show how you make those markets and what scale, because that will also give investor confidence and visibility for the demand for new materials, for new construction techniques, for new types of work, public procurement. And that should be supported by things like public procurement and public bank investment in supply chains, in skills, in businesses. So we actually build the enabling environment and infrastructure and ecosystem to allow that run rate to work. And that signalling of that. And it was interesting, in London, I advised the Mayor of London on this. We advised, and he set up a London Climate Finance Facility, which has just received a big grant from the UK Infrastructure Bank, precisely to do this at the city level, to build those supply chains and skills to move forward. And now we get to the stakeholders. So that's something you could do, but who needs to do? How did they get that money? Well, because we persuaded the Treasury that it was a good investment. So in the end, finance ministers need to understand why this is important. They need to understand why it's important for their issues of financial stability, efficiency. So I think that's the critical stakeholder we need to address to bring them along with our game. So finance ministries need to understand that another Ukraine shock would impact household incomes by 5 to 6%, and we can halve that through good efficiency. That buildings are 55% of global assets, and brown buildings in Europe have a 30% discount premium on them. That's a financial stability and investment risk. And that insurers are pulling out of buildings or raising premiums to the point where there's a fundamental issue of underinvestment in the sector. So we need to speak into their language and their needs so that we can persuade them that because of the macroeconomic impacts as well as the climate alignment, they need to allow us to use financial instruments and prioritise this as an economic reform project to underpin transitions. Because at the moment, I'm afraid, for all the evidence from the bottom up, the top-down view doesn't see this as a project that links to their objectives.
Thank you, Nick. Great points there. Let's turn to Ella. CBRE provides services to the real estate sector, so you've got a great vantage point here to understand the perspective of investors and how are they thinking about aligning their real estate portfolios, and on commercial real estate, how does that sort of owner-tenant relationship play into that, and also where are the interests of these various stakeholders aligning and where are they still misaligned? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ellery Tendonoy. I head ESG, Business Development and Innovation, across continental Europe for CBRE. For those who don't know us, CBRE is the #1 global leader for services provided to the real estate industry. We provide services along the whole real estate value chain, 115,000 employees across the world, $30 billion of revenue per year, to give you an idea of our impact in the real estate industry. We're #1 with regards to valuations of asset buildings, #1 with regards to advisory for investors, occupiers, active and property management, facility management, project management, so really along the whole value chain. And what I'd like to offer you in the very short time this afternoon is maybe a deep dive into what the real estate industry is about, the key trends that we're seeing with regards to decarbonisation and sustainability, and how the dynamics are currently operating in the market, because this is a market topic. So when you break down real estate to its most simple, to a very simple understanding, we're looking at landlords and tenants at asset level. And the clients that I work for and deal with on a daily basis are those in the investor space, so institutional investors and investment management firms. These are the players that own the largest share of commercial real estate across the globe. They have a sustainability strategy at house level, at portfolio level, and at asset level. And their portfolios are made of hundreds and thousands of lines of commercial property, and often we speak about commercial property without defining what that actually is. We're talking about different asset classes here: offices, retail, logistics, life sciences buildings, all buildings that are non-residential. CBRE is also active on multifamily residential that we consider as a separate asset class to individual home ownership. So with regards to your question, Sarah, on alignment, I think that's one of the key changes we're seeing, and that's going to accelerate in 2024, and it's great news. First of all, we have alignment between investors, between owners of these assets across our regions. And how does that translate in the market? That translates in the fact that during transactions, and we see this at CBRE because we're the #1 broker worldwide, on top of the usual financial and technical due diligence, there are ESG due diligences now part of the transaction process. That meaning that in the buy and sell process of commercial property assets, investors are looking for that picture of what an asset looks like in terms of energy, carbon, climate performance. And that has an impact on the price, on the value, and meaning that investors are aligned there in looking at that criteria as being a key one. And why are they interested in taking that into account? It's not for the planet's sake. It's because there's a direct impact on financial liquidity. The scary word out there in the market is stranded, and you don't want any stranded assets in your portfolios, and that impacts your decision-making and business-making process. That's the first alignment that we're seeing, and that's going to accelerate. The second one is alignment between investors and what we call in our real estate jargon, occupiers. The corporate clients that occupy commercial real estate space, those who are in the logistics assets, those who occupy the offices, the corporates out there. Now, for the first time, we're seeing alignment between investors that have this risk of liquidity and occupiers, the corporate players that have committed publicly, for most of them, through their CEOs, to signing SBTI commitments, who have disclosed their carbon footprint with regards to CDP. So they've made these announcements, and then they turn to their teams and say, well, guys, now we need to make it happen. So that decarbonisation pathway that our occupier clients have for their own business activities also translates down to the real estate they occupy. So they're looking for assets that are net zero. So we've got demand on the tenant side, and that's great news, and that's happening now. We've also got alignment on the financing side, and that's the topic that we're addressing today, meaning on the bank side. And in real estate, nothing takes place when you're looking at developing a new build, at a renovation project, and even in a transaction process. If you don't have any financing, nothing happens. And we're seeing it at the moment in a context of higher interest rates. Transactions have slowed down in the past few months. And so in order for that alignment that I was describing with regards to investors and occupiers to make sense, we also need the banks to be pushing ESG, and they are now, thanks to their own requirements with regards to the information, the data needed regarding buildings performance. And why are the banks getting into it? Because the European Central Bank in Europe and also across the board in other regions, the Fed is looking into the banks' books, wondering if the value of those assets in portfolio is the right value, is the energy and carbon climate risk taken into account. So that's a really interesting underlying market trend, very concrete, that we're seeing. And behind me at CBRE, there are close to 300 people advising and dedicated to ESG on the ground at portfolio and asset level with all things related to sustainability. And we're over 600 globally and growing. So this gives you an idea of the demand out there on the side of our clients. Now, I also wanted to stress the fact that we're at a very exciting time in the real estate industry where we're consolidating methodologies. We're moving towards that common language to make that alignment that I was just describing happen. With regards to energy, this goes through EPC ratings, but also carbon methodologies that are being used, such as CREM, that is slowly becoming a standard, to give you a few examples, and then also formalisation of KPIs linked to value. Now, what does that mean? A very good example of that is the work that is currently being undertaken at a regional level across Europe via the RICS to integrate in valuers' expertise work ESG criteria, and so we're also getting alignment there through consolidation of methodologies and formalisation of KPIs, and that's what's going to make it happen. We really need to translate, the macro public policy level right down to what's happening in the industry, because it's the industry players that are going to make this happen, at least for commercial property. Now, what's also really interesting, if I've got another minute. Really, just to conclude on this, because this is a complex topic, and it's and I think it's useful to have this industry perspective. We're seeing financial tools emerge on top of the sustainability-linked loans, the green bonds, the sustainability bonds in that space on the banking side. We're also seeing investment management firms set up dedicated energy transition funds for real estate, dedicated to financing equipment renewal that serves decarbonisation performance. We're seeing these funds also directing financing to solar PV installations on buildings, especially logistics. And we're also seeing more and more interest with regards to EV charging, bringing together the ESG story on the building side with the ESG story on the mobility side. And I think that's a very important one to have with regards to the future of real estate and cities. And to finish, I just wanted to throw out a few key points where we need acceleration. Renovation is the key topic in Europe. It's not new build. We have a 1% renovation retrofit in Europe. That's where our energy should be on. 80% of the buildings that will be here in 2050 already exist across the European Union. We need to make sure that in the industry, the net zero carbon race doesn't eclipse the climate adaptation need, the resilient side of the coin. That's the other coin of carbon, and it is often set aside to focus on mitigation. We also need nature strategy and biodiversity included, and we need social value and the water topic to come onto the table, especially in emerging countries. And then finally, public policy can help us also with regards to making the ESG story attractive, sexy. We need it to become less of a technical topic and actually speak to people's minds and hearts in business and in public policy. And for that to happen, we need a good mix between technicality and narrative. That means we need a lot of training and across the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ella. Great insights there. Lutz, if I could turn to you to provide us with a perspective from Germany. How can we deliver these financial needs for near zero and resilient buildings, both new and old? And what are your policies that are towards implementation of decarbonisation and resilience strategies, and what are the priority actions that you're taking? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and it's really great to be on this panel here today with you. So firstly, I'll comment on the national situation and then on the international dimension. On the national level in Germany, we've just passed a really ambitious Buildings and Energy Act, and Lothar van Krestas is here sitting. He has worked on it much more than I do, so he's the real expert on it. That was so. In this package, we adopted both ambitious standards and regulation. That is much tougher than the ones we had before. And we also focused or refocused the public funding schemes that we had. Now there's a total of 11 billion euro going into public support for retrofitting and for new sustainable heating systems. But we don't have an indefinite budget in order to support the private in actually fulfilling these tasks. So we had to somehow really focus on what was our priority, and only spend the money on the ambitious measures, which means there are other measures that will not be funded in the future. And what we have seen in this domestic debate is gaining acceptance for such ambitious measures was far from straightforward, and it showed how important early and continuous engagement with all stakeholders is, because you need, in the end, you need the public opinion on your side. But then turning to the international level, I wanted to talk a bit about the big picture, about indices and how our action in the building sector contributes to the global goals, especially the doubling of energy efficiency until 2030. But I think, Nick, you have made these points already quite adequately. So what I want to focus on is now, how do we get, and I know this is going to be dealt with in another panel, but it's important for us as developed countries as well. How do we get our developing country partners on board? Because in these countries, what we see is there are some barriers, including limited availability of public funds, complexity of financing structures, the heightened risk perception, and then also lack of capacity among institutions to prepare bankable projects. So what do we do about it? Key priorities for us is to improve the access to climate finance, to integrate public and private finance as well, and to strengthen the role of national development banks. So starting with the first, public finance. We, through the Ministry for Economy and Climate Action, through our International Climate Initiative and co-financing with other partners, we provide more than 200 million euros in financing to various projects that contribute to addressing these challenges that I've talked about. And one example I want to give here is a fund that we have set up as Germany together with Luxembourg. It's called the City Climate Finance Gap Fund, which has been capitalized with over 100 million already. And it's an interesting example because this fund showcases how we can support early stage project preparation to bridge the funding gaps and support that cities specifically face in the critical early stages of project development, where probably Ella, you or your clients still do not come in because it's such an early project development stage where the projects are too risky for you. So we use our money wisely and try to bridge these gaps to make the projects ready so that they are bankable and investable for private investors. So this is already the second topic I want to talk about. We have to get private capital on board, and so it's so important that we have this conversation here now. And then third priority is taking national development banks in developing countries on board. And we have now launched a program called National Development Banks for Urban Climate Action, the NUCA project, with a budget of 20 million euros. That's about to start, and that recognizes the pivotal role of NDBs in scaling up funding and de-risking projects. Because in the countries that we work with, they know the local actors, they know the local circumstances, they know the local needs, they know the local lending conditionalities. So we will work in this project starting with 5 partner countries to build up their capacities and help to mobilize private capital in these countries for climate smart investments at the subnational level. Then one last point I wanted to make is the importance of bringing all stakeholders on board, and therefore we think that it's really helpful that the Buildings Breakthrough has been launched, and we are a proud partner in this initiative. It's an initiative that will bring on board countries, but also relevant stakeholders from the private sector. It will be implemented by the Global Alliance for Building and Construction. And at this forum here, we, as Germany, we have announced that we'll support the global ABC in order to make them able to implement the breakthrough, the Buildings Breakthrough, with a funding of up to 2.5 million euros.
Thank you, Lutz. Thank you. That's great. That warms us up on the topic of emerging markets for the second panel as part of this this session. And Senator Dantec, if I can turn to you, please, if you can tell us a little bit about how the real estate transition is a huge priority, clearly, for the French government, and as demonstrated by the convening of this meeting, which is really a fantastic opportunity. How are you thinking about the policies that we need to achieve the alignment of the real estate sector with the Paris Agreement, and how will you be bringing your population along this journey? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And as we have a translation, I continue in French. You have headphone. Or maybe you understand French. La question que vous posez est aujourd'hui une question assez complexe, et sans être trop long et rentrer trop dans les détails techniques, mais c'est très vite quand même une question assez compliquée techniquement et financièrement. Je crois qu'il faut quand même redire en introduction quelque chose d'important, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, les coûts de la réhabilitation du logement sont trop importants pour qu'il y ait un modèle économique simplement sur la réduction du coût de la facture énergétique. Ça, c'est un point extrêmement important. Sinon, il n'y aurait pas besoin d'argent public, les choses se feraient naturellement. Mais ça n'est pas le cas, et c'est d'autant moins le cas que l'augmentation des taux d'intérêt rend encore plus difficile aujourd'hui ce retour sur investissement. Donc, il faut absolument que la puissance publique intervienne pour qu'on ait une dynamique de réhabilitation du parc. Et je suis bien d'accord, ça a été dit avant moi, qu'en Europe, la première question, c'est la réhabilitation du parc existant, plus que les logements nouveaux, et notamment tout ce qui a été construit dans les années 70-80, les années 80, où les normes ont été très basses, et on a des passoires énergétiques. Donc, le gouvernement... Alors moi, je ne suis pas membre du gouvernement, je suis un parlementaire, donc je regarde avec recul, mais je crois que la logique en France, aujourd'hui, elle est de deux manières, et à chaque fois, ça pose des questions, y compris de tensions, voire de contradictions. La première chose, c'est de mettre de la norme, évidemment, et notamment, en France, le Parlement a voté l'interdiction de la location des passoires thermiques. Donc le classement GH, les pires classements, où effectivement les propriétaires ne peuvent plus louer les pires passoires thermiques. Ce qui effectivement est un signal très fort, y compris sur la valeur du logement, mais aussi quelque chose qui vient en tension de l'autre aspect des choses, qui est qu'on manque de logements aujourd'hui, et que ça participe donc de l'augmentation du prix du logement. Et cette tension-là, elle est évidente et elle est assez difficile à gérer. Et on voit bien, y compris, un retour du débat politique sur le fait de dire on est allé trop vite et il faut laisser les passoires thermiques dans l'offre de location. Ça, c'est le premier point. Le deuxième point sur lequel la France est aujourd'hui très investie, c'est l'aide publique à la rénovation, à travers un processus qui s'appelle MaPrimeRénov', doté, même s'il y a eu moins d'argent que prévu, mais d'environ 2 milliards d'euros. Donc 2 milliards, c'est quand même une somme assez conséquente. Le choix du gouvernement français, c'est d'allouer cette somme plutôt sur des rénovations globales, pas simplement la pompe à chaleur ou les fenêtres, mais une rénovation globale, et surtout d'accompagner les ménages les plus modestes. Ça, c'est vraiment le choix. C'est-à-dire que les classes moyennes supérieures ont très peu d'aides. Les aides sont focalisées vers ceux qui n'ont objectivement pas les moyens de mener les travaux. Ce qui, socialement, peut tout à fait s'expliquer, se comprendre et se défendre, sauf que si on s'adresse aux plus modestes, même s'il reste que 10, 15, 20% du prix de la rénovation globale, ça n'est pas toujours évident de les trouver quand même pour ces ménages modestes. Et surtout, ça ne donne aucun signal. Et je voudrais vraiment revenir là-dessus. Du coup, je suis un peu technique, mais on est un moment dans un débat extrêmement technique. Sinon, il n'y a pas d'impact. Qui est qu'il n'y a pas de signal de données aux classes moyennes qui ont plus de capacité d'investissement dans la rénovation, mais ils sont aussi en attente d'un signal d'accompagnement de l'État. Donc, il faudra voir l'impact du dispositif tel qu'il est. Moi, je crois notamment qu'on a un grand enjeu européen d'échanger en permanence sur l'impact des politiques menées dans les différents pays européens, voir si les choix allemands ont plus d'impact que les choix français réciproquement. Mais c'est le choix qui est fait aujourd'hui. Il n'est pas démontré encore, puisque ça vient d'arriver, que c'est le choix qui aura le plus d'impact. Surtout, et moi je voudrais vraiment insister sur ce point-là, et qui revient aussi à ce qui a été dit avant moi, qui est qu'on a un énorme problème avec les classes moyennes supérieures, qui ont les moyens, sur le papier, de l'investissement de rénovation, donc qui pourraient se dire, soit par le cœur, pour faire l'effort sur le changement climatique, soit par la raison, regardant la dépense énergétique, pourraient y aller. Sauf que ces classes moyennes ont été très, très intéressées ces 10 dernières années par le fait que l'argent ne coûtait rien à emprunter et qu'elles sont allées au maximum de leur taux d'endettement, y compris pour acheter de l'immobilier. Et que donc, si elles vont voir leur banque, malgré des revenus confortables, en disant « je voudrais réhabiliter », la banque va dire « c'est une bonne idée, mais vous êtes déjà à votre plafond d'endettement ». Et donc, si on ne sort pas, et c'est des mesures extrêmement techniques, du plafond d'endettement, et c'est quasiment du niveau de Bâle 3, là, les investissements de réhabilitation et globalement les investissements à impact climatique positif, on a une deuxième impasse. Donc, je suis peut-être un peu technique dans mon intervention, mais je pense qu'on a à la fois, en France c'est très clair, une volonté politique d'accélérer sur la rénovation du parc bâti, ça n'est pas discutable, mais qu'on a énormément de difficultés techniques, d'architecture financière à interroger, et je pense qu'on est encore qu'au début de cette réflexion. Mais on a donc plusieurs tensions. Tension parce qu'il n'y a pas assez de logements, tension parce que les ménages aujourd'hui sont très endettés, et qu'à partir de là, pour arriver à des niveaux quantitatifs de rénovation globale tels que fixés aujourd'hui dans le discours, on est loin, on est très très loin d'y être. Dernier point, pour ne pas être non plus trop long, en plus j'ai un train à prendre, donc il ne faudrait pas que je le rate, mais c'est que, et je parle en tant qu'élu local aussi, l'aspect local est essentiel. Sans la mobilisation des gouvernements locaux, des municipalités, des régions, qui ont la proximité, qui ont la capacité de porter l'information vers les propriétaires, on n'y arrivera pas. Ça, en France, ça existe aussi avec un dispositif particulier et des agences locales d'information. Le dispositif a beaucoup changé ces dernières années avec l'arrivée des régions. Mais je ne rentre pas trop dans les détails. Mais si on n'a pas la mobilisation des élus locaux, si on n'a pas la mobilisation des filières artisanales locales, qui sont un autre enjeu, avec là aussi des goulots d'étranglement évidents, là aussi, on n'ira pas au niveau quantitatif nécessaire. Donc, pour résumer, je crois qu'il y a une ambition française très claire, affirmée politiquement, mais aussi énormément de difficultés, voire de contradictions suivant les dispositifs. Donc une nécessité de gouvernance multiniveau, d'échanges avec l'ensemble des filières et d'échanges au-delà d'un pays pour voir les meilleures réponses, parce que je pense qu'on n'est encore qu'au début de trouver une solution vraiment performante. Et je reviens tout à fait à ce qui a été dit aussi avant sur le fait qu'en plus, c'était déjà pas simple, mais en plus, il faut maintenant totalement intégrer les enjeux d'adaptation qui ne sont pas obligatoirement tout à fait les mêmes réponses techniques et que la France a eu le courage de prendre maintenant une trajectoire plus 4 degrés qui va rentrer donc dans les normes de réhabilitation dans les prochains mois et que ça fait quand même tout cela une grande complexité. Merci.
Well, many thanks, Senator Dontek. Great to hear how you're addressing the affordability issue in France. And I would love to be able to delve into these issues more with you, but I think we'll have to wind up this panel there due to lack of time. But thank you so much all for your fantastic insights. If everyone can join. Thank you. Okay, so we now have a second panel to explore this issue. So if I may invite up to the stage Mr. Jamie Ferguson, who's the Global Director for Climate Business. The Climate Business at IFC. Welcome, Jamie. And Mr. Jean-Pascal Boer to the stage. Where is Mr. There we go, Mr. Jean-Pascal. He's the Director of International Cooperation and Sustainable Urban Development at the Ministry of Construction and Housing and Town Planning in Côte d'Ivoire. Welcome. And Mr. Ali Mohammed Hassan, who's the Director of Environment at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in Somalia. Welcome, Mr. Ali. So, Jamie, if I can turn to you first. IFC is an investor, it's a capacity builder, it's a standard setter, and it's highly active in both residential and commercial real estate, and with a big focus in emerging markets. So from your vantage point, what are the key issues on real estate alignment to net zero in emerging markets, and what can be done to increase those financing flows for both mitigation and adaptation? Thank you.
Thank you very much and for including me on the panel, and well done everyone for making it to Friday afternoon. You're nearly there. So for those who don't know us, IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank. We're the largest dedicated private sector development bank covering all emerging markets. And in the area of climate finance, we committed just shy of 15 billion last year, which was about 46% of our book, and ever increasing. And green buildings is really important to us. Over the last 7 years, we've committed just shy of 12 billion, both directly through developers, but also significantly through banks, where we can help banks set up green mortgage lines. And in addition to our money, from a sort of public good perspective, we originated the EDGE Green Certification Program, which is now used across 100 countries and has had about 70 billion of investment in certified buildings, and we're following that up with a building resilience index, which we're hoping will get the same scale to support increased resilience in the building stock. So your question, I think this is a little emblematic on a Friday afternoon, that to have a slightly smaller panel for a bigger problem. It's been said several times in the last couple of days that half the buildings that will exist in 2050 or 60, choose your number, don't exist today. Well, 80% of the extra buildings that are going to get built are going to be built in emerging markets. And 70% of those are going to be homes because they're needed desperately. So that's where the problem is. If it's a lot easier to green new build than it is, and to resilience new build than it is to refurbish, this is where our focus should be. And yet there's only 3 of us up here now rather than 6 before. So that's, a physical representation of it. Meanwhile, it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And IFC issued a piece of analytical work called Building Green just late last year, which identifies a 1.5 trillion investment opportunity in emerging markets in the coming decade in green and resilient buildings. So that's the scale. What's the nature of the challenge, and how is it different from the conversation you just heard? So firstly, the need. The need is massively and predominantly in affordable housing, homes, residential. Secondly, the nature of that housing is that it's typically self-build and typically in a lot of countries, particularly with my colleagues here with Africa focus, there's an insufficiency of formal building sector, and there's an insufficiency of long-term local currency capital and mortgages to fund that. So it's not just how do we do green build and resilient buildings, how do we create the supply and demand of a building industry in the first place. There can be codes or building codes or not building codes, and if they're not necessarily enforced, and sometimes they're reliant on legacy or picked up codes from elsewhere that may not work. The Indian building codes require a glass area that assumes Northern European sunlight levels. Go figure, right? So lots of work to be done, and I would argue, whereas Europe elsewhere has led with green building and is now saying, well, how do we make it resilient? We got to lead with resilient in emerging markets. This is where the brunt of the challenge is going to happen. So I don't want to preempt my colleagues, but I think it's worth saying what will happen in the coming decades in Somalia and in Côte d'Ivoire. In Somalia, we're talking about 56 more days per year over 35 degrees centigrade. We're talking about a 25 centimeter sea level rise. We're talking about much heavier and more extreme rains and more rain as a whole by 2050. Côte d'Ivoire, we're talking about more days above 35 degrees centigrade. We're talking about 25 centimeter sea level rise. And different parts of the country will have more rain or less rain, but always more heavy. So, that is the reality by 2050. So what can we do? Not to, make it sound too challenging. What can we do? So there is plenty that can be done. Certification is powerful. It is, we've experienced with EDGE and others that, where there aren't building codes or capacity to enforce them, you can use banks as your proxy, right? So if banks are looking, if you can set up green building lines of finance that are certified, then effectively you're getting the incentives into that system. And if you can have pricing differentiation in that context, then it can move the market. There is room for regulatory encouragement and incentives, and not to be repetitive for those who were at the opening, where I spoke at the opening session, but there's some good, smart incentives which respond to the very human reality of building, the deeply societal and human realities of building that don't necessarily need to be financial, fiscal incentives. Peru's had great success by offering approvals for an additional floor if you're building green. Who doesn't want an extra floor? Argentina's had great success with having a faster approval process for permitting if you're building green. Who doesn't want a 3-month permit versus a 2-month permit? Larger lots in India. So there are a range of ways of doing it that aren't necessarily fiscal. We need the support of Germany and others on blended finance to help allow for differential pricing and to help create long-term mortgage offerings. And then we are experimenting at the moment in India, and if it works, we will take it elsewhere with a self-build version of the EDGE certificate, where we're financing we're building finance companies, mortgage companies who are providing very small loans for self-built homes. And we've simplified the EDGE certification program so that future homeowners can work with their contractors to get certified for that. And then again, on the resilience side, we're hoping adoption by the insurance industry will drive pricing incentives in that space. So enough from me, but the start of a conversation.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Turning to Jean-Pascal now. How is the situation in Côte d'Ivoire, and what actions are being taken there, and what policies are being put in place to drive sustainable urban development? Over to you. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette opportunité. Je pense que mon prédécesseur a emboîté le pas sur un certain nombre de réalités que nous vivons ou que nous vivrons dans quelques années. Alors, il faut dire que la Côte d'Ivoire aujourd'hui, comme beaucoup de pays africains, est confrontée à une problématique en termes de logement. Pour la Côte d'Ivoire spécifiquement, nous sommes à un gap de 800 000 logements aujourd'hui, 600 000 dans la capitale Abidjan, et c'est un taux qui se bonifie de 10% par an. Donc il y a un véritable besoin. En même temps que c'est un problème, il faut voir ça aussi comme une opportunité, parce qu'il y a du travail à créer derrière, il y a des entreprises à pouvoir développer un certain nombre d'initiatives. Et donc, il y a une vraie opportunité de migrer avec les nouveaux matériaux bas carbone. Parce qu'on n'a pas totalement fini de construire comme en Europe, où il faut passer à la rénovation qui coûte cher. Donc, on a vraiment une opportunité à ce niveau-là. Au niveau du développement urbain, c'est une question qui est de plus en plus prégnante, qui nous amène aujourd'hui à être en train de réviser notre politique nationale urbaine. Et cette politique nationale urbaine ne va plus se limiter seulement aux différentes réglementations de planification, mais c'est surtout d'intégrer le volet du changement climatique et surtout de la transition écologique. Il y a plus d'agrégation au niveau des différents ministères qui interviennent dans les secteurs de l'urbain. Alors, sur la question spécifique de l'adaptation, de l'atténuation, il y a un certain nombre de mesures qui ont été prises. Si vous avez soutenu il y a 2 ans, non, 1 an en arrière, la Côte d'Ivoire a abrité la COP sur justement la lutte contre la désertification et la déforestation. Pour dire à quel point le gouvernement ivoirien est soucieux justement de pouvoir s'attaquer à ces problèmes-là. La Côte d'Ivoire connaît aussi une emprise de mer qui fait que la question de l'érosion côtière est aussi une préoccupation. Et au niveau des ministères en charge, il y a des actions qui sont menées justement à ce que les effets de l'érosion côtière ne soient pas très, très difficiles. Abidjan, à cause, je veux dire, de ce que pendant 30 ans, l'État, avec la crise que nous avons connue, n'a pas vraiment adressé les questions du cadre bâti. Ça a été plutôt laissé à la main des sociétés privées. Et aujourd'hui, l'État est en train de reprendre la main. Ces sociétés privées n'ont pas forcément respecté la réglementation en place, au point que beaucoup de dysfonctionnements, beaucoup de malfaçons sont constatés. Et quand il pleut à Abidjan, tout le monde a peur parce que les inondations deviennent une vraie problématique. Récemment, on a dû déguerpir à notre corps défendant des populations, des zones à risque où elles étaient installées. Mais après, l'État, justement, pèse entre ce que veulent ou attendent les populations et ce que lui, en tant qu'État, a à faire pour pouvoir, bien entendu, protéger les tiens. Nous avons aussi nos CDN qui sont vraiment en train de se positionner avec, j'allais dire, beaucoup d'engagement. Il existe aujourd'hui un plan de partenaire avec les différentes parties prenantes. Donc, c'est-à-dire que les différentes parties prenantes en Côte d'Ivoire ont décidé, à travers un cadre, comment est-ce qu'on adresse la question. On a aussi une territorialisation de justement des CDN. Au niveau national, une stratégie, mais comment est-ce qu'au niveau des gouvernements locaux, comment est-ce qu'au niveau des communes, on traduit cela? Et donc les maires sont de plus en plus impliqués. Et à ce jour, on a 6 ou 7 communes qui se sont dotées avec l'appui de ICLE de plans territoriaux municipaux. Donc c'est aussi des dynamiques qui sont importantes à soutenir. Et le ministère de la Construction, du Logement et de l'Urbanisme, ainsi que le ministère de l'Environnement et du Développement durable, qui depuis 6 mois se voit ajouter le nom de transition écologique, pour dire à quel point on a des réformes vraiment qui se mettent en place. Ils vont bientôt présenter dans le cadre du FEM 8 justement un projet intitulé « Transition vers un environnement bâti net zéro en carbone en Côte d'Ivoire ». Donc c'est un peu aujourd'hui ce à quoi nous sommes en train de faire face. Et bien entendu, il y a des textes qui ont été pris pour réguler le secteur de la construction, le secteur du bâti, intégrant un certain nombre de mesures visant l'atténuation. Voilà un peu pour ce qui est de l'environnement en Côte d'Ivoire. Is the hand of my
Thank you so much, Jean-Pascal. That's fascinating to hear and very encouraging that you're looking to be integrated with your policies and your NDC and seeing how they can be joined up in an effective way. Thank you for that. If I can come to Mr. Ali. In Somalia, is it possible for climate considerations to get bandwidth among the so many competing priorities, things like access to energy, let alone decarbonisation? And how is this built environment being viewed in this context? And what measures are being taken to help businesses, families adapt to this changing climate? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Ali Hassan from Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Somali Federal Government. I'm very happy being attended to this panel discussion about the construction and climate change related issues. Thank you all of you for your kind listening. As you all know, Somalia lays on Horn of Africa. Somalia has recently joined to East African Community, which exists or consists around 7 countries around. Somalia has a long history of, destructions and different wars which they faced since 1991. Somalia is one of the least developed countries in the world. Somalia is now getting better. Somalia is now coming back to the world. Somalia has developed its own good governance with the support of the international community. Somalia is meeting with all constraints and challenges such as the least developing countries meeting. Somalia is between drought and flood. Might be wonderful. Some seasons Somalia is under flood, a situation which hit very severe, and sometimes it hit by drought, which has make all it severe. So all these Somalia is meeting constraints of challenges of life. Somalia, on the other hand, is making improvement at the security at the construction site. Somalia is the Somali diaspora is returning back to Somalia and making long buildings and good construction is good real estate is in the country. As well as that, Somalia is getting help from the international community such as an African Development Bank and World Bank, assisting to create, cheaper and buildings and resell again to the community. All these are the developments and the constraints that we are facing. For this stage we are now, we can say we are recovering and coming back to normal. At the terms of legislations and the regulations, Somali government is making good progress at the National House Act and National Housing Guideline, National Housing Policy, National Housing Strategy, National Environmental Act. All those are working together in order to get Somalia rebuilt in a good manner and the best, decarbonization method. Somalia is making, working at the side of energy and to tackle about the climate change. Somalia community, as I said, are facing droughts and floods. These are, caused by the climate change somehow. And we haven't had every year to happen drought and flood. So for this to happen causes by the climate change. And Somalia is doing its best to tackle about the climate change, and this could bring, the Somali communities to receive stability and resilience for their housing and construction. Somalia mainly have their people do not have buildings and construction. They might leave sometimes the premises of the government. Recently, the government requested to move from the government's land in order the government works their premises, and the community said, we don't know where to go. It's a big question. Maybe the international community, here is my problem I'm saying. Also, there is, we have meeting Somalia lack of awareness and poor skills of construction capacity building. We have experienced in the last year some long buildings collapsed and caused the death of a human who were living under that premise. And that accident were 2 to 3 accidents published in whole magazines all over the world, and that causes lack of knowledge and less capacity building. So for us, we are here to not forget to request from the international community, consultants, engineers, to look at Somalia and work with the public-private partnership companies who are working on the ground in Somalia to assist them their skills and what best to do to build when building premises. When I come back to climate change, Somalia is making progress, and we are doing giving people growing and awareness, and just making a consultant to those companies who are only thinking about economic benefits. We are also doing to release, and we have released the regulations. And you all know when regulations are set, the implementation also is a problem to make them adopt with the rule and regulations set by the government. And we are in the process of to win our implementation process and that level. Also, we are doing as a government to be our people in the best manner of land use management in order to avoid habitat loss and ecosystem. All this is what my government is doing, and we are very happy being here. And when it's back, we will share with my government all information we have collected from here. And that is what I wanted to contribute to this panel discussion. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ali. If I can ask the audience to start thinking about any questions that you may have, we may have time for just 1 or 2 questions. So while we have the privilege of our esteemed experts here, please do take advantage of that and think, what's the burning question in your mind? And while you're thinking, let me just come back to each of the speakers in turn to ask, maybe you can say what one of the key takeaways that you are taking from this meeting away, and what action you will be taking, or what will be your kind of top priority for the rest of 2024. Jamie.
Thanks, Sarah, and really fascinating to hear from Jean-Pascal and Ali Mohammed on the realities in those 2 countries. So for us, priorities, seizing this political momentum, right? This is really important, and it's got to turn into action at the national level. All, as has been discussed richly today, buildings are deeply local issues. And so that's got to turn into national level action, and any way we can help with that and give it momentum and turn policy change into accelerate the reaction to that policy change with capital is our ambition. And then specifically on the focus, we're really keen to ramp up the engagement on the resilience side of the business. We're really thrilled by the impact that the combination of sort of levers on change of financing and capacity building and the tools of EDGE has had in market movement. We're really keen to achieve the same thing on the resilience side with the Building Resilience Index. So we're sort of busy talking to partners on that piece as well.
Thank you. And Jean-Pascal, one of your key takeaways from this meeting, or actions, priorities for 2024?
Pour nous, c'est aujourd'hui le passage à une échelle industrielle de la production. Voilà, aujourd'hui, il faut vraiment des investissements pour que la transformation, justement, s'appuie sur une industrialisation qui aujourd'hui stagne encore. C'est le lieu pour moi de rappeler aux différents partenaires qu'il y a vraiment un marché aujourd'hui à conquérir en Côte d'Ivoire, parce que le besoin, il est énorme. Il y a des facilités que l'État a mises en place, notamment sur la ténure foncière, notamment sur l'importation de certains matériaux et sur la délivrance de toute la paperasse administrative. Après, ce n'est pas seulement de venir investir pour faire de l'argent, mais c'est de créer une nouvelle communauté de développement qui veut que de plus en plus nous travaillons avec les universitaires. Donc la Côte d'Ivoire est vraiment propice aux partenaires pour développer, pour investir et surtout pour pouvoir apporter notre modeste part à la, comment j'allais dire ça, à la lutte contre le changement climatique. Voilà. This was my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. And Ali Mohammed, what's your key takeaway from this meeting, or your top priority for the rest of the year? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. This is really a great conference, which has great influence once we back and all over the world when they go back home. Somalia is, as you all know, lays on the Horn of Africa. Somalia is a very good terminal according to the world traffic issue, from far Asia to Europe to Middle East to Africa. Somalia hosts a lot of ships and airplanes passing through its airbase, and the air, also the ocean and the Red Sea. Somalia is very crucial for all the world to invest. Somalia is preparing to be one of crucial countries in the world. As we all know, Somalia has the longest coastline in Africa, estimated in 3,333 kilometers. Somalia has all those potential. Somalia has a long beach line which tourists can come, and Somalia is making progress on the stability and the security with the international community support. Somalia will meet to wave, with full open-handed welcoming to invest by all stakeholders from the world. Somalia has potential of investing all international companies with the wealth. Somalia government is making integration with all international partners close and the second to come to Somalia. Somalia is heading to make job creation for their people with the support of the international community. Somalia is going to be where all the people rest. Somalia is going to be a beautiful country, a green country in the future. That's where we are heading to, and my government is preparing to be like that. Somalia, as a Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, we have set several mitigations like environmental impact assessment to assist the construction companies. We have also, as I said recently, we have set the regulations and the standards. We have also set the promoting sustainable construction practices, public awareness and education. That's what we are doing on the ground. But we are appealing to all in this conference and the international community who are hearing my voice. Somalia needs your help. Somalia needs in a special eye than all other countries. Somalia was in terrible and destruction around 3 decades. Somalia now is facing and heading to make a progress and development. And that is all what I think will be most priority which we will have. And the 2 priorities that we can, or 3 priorities that we can mention is first job creation, then and supporting Somalia housing, since the people are most and 70% of them are less of a housing system. And the third is Somalia requires to receive from the world standing to its government shoulder to shoulder. And thank you for your listening. That is the priorities we are expecting to keep in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So if I can now turn to the audience, does anybody have a question for our panelists? Please, there's some microphones just there. Maybe we can, I think there's 3 questions. If you could take the microphone, and we'll just take them we'll take the 3 very quickly, and then some answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer Kenneth, CEO National Housing Uganda. My question is to Jamie, IFC. When you look at Africa and the rest of the world, these are 2 worlds. The rest of the world is talking renovation. Development has already happened. But then Africa is talking about development. We also are looking at faster rising population, which are eating up the land. From the financing perspective, what is your strategy to make sure that now you can curb this development in Africa? Because there's going to be high demand for materials for construction, but also the actual physical development. Financing is extremely expensive. What is the strategy from IFC? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take the second question as well.
Hello, my name is Anthony Nahas. I'm working as a consultant on green buildings and green building neighborhoods. My question is also about financing to Mr. Ferguson, specifically about green bonds. I know that the World Bank has issued green bonds. Would you be so kind as to talk to us about green bonds as one of the principal solutions for financing of green buildings and green building neighborhoods? Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take this third question here and then we'll go to answers. Thank you.
So I'll be brief. We've heard today about finance technology and how it meets human beings. I know that Jamie, the IFC, has the EDGE tool, which I like, but it requires an ecosystem to work. And I understand. So my question is, in Côte d'Ivoire and in Somalia, when you talk about needing to train and to create the jobs, are people incentivized correctly to get the jobs training using the IFC EDGE tool to be able to build better homes?
Great, thank you. Well, let's start with Jamie. Maybe you can talk about the issue of finance being so expensive. The rates are so high in less developed countries. There's many issues, currency risk, etc. And also, if you can address the point on green bonds. Thank you.
Yeah, with pleasure. So thank you, Engineer Kenneth. So we're coming about this from two sides, supply and demand, right? And we're trying to support financing for the supply of housing, in particular affordable housing. And there, sometimes, you know, even in developed countries, affordable housing has to be a public-private partnership because subsidy is a necessary piece of it. And so we're engaging there in PPPs. And then on the demand side, it's about building a mortgage market. And ultimately, mortgages rely on a local capital market where there's sufficient liquidity and depth for long-term local currency financing. And there, in several countries, we have financed a local mortgage refinance company, which allows the banks to provide mortgages and offload them and refinance them into an entity that can issue bonds in the capital markets. And that has a sort of multi-benefit because it's both generating the long-term capital for mortgage financing, but it's also helping build the local capital market, which, you know, in terms of climate response, ultimately one of the great challenges is a lot of climate investment, not just housing, requires long-term local currency financing. And so building capital markets locally is key. Green bonds, we're heavily involved. Thank you, Anthony. We're involved as an issuer, so IFC is a AAA entity itself and actually helped ignite that market. There'd been sort of the odd small issuance, but we were the first one to come along with a large $1 billion issuance, and it was in 2012, I think it was, and it was sold in minutes, and it got the whole market really woken up to the potential of this. So we're an issuer. But more importantly, we're also, that's sort of the back end to look at the capital markets. We're also very busy at the front end operationally. So we're a buyer of labeled bonds. We're a big capacity builder. We are training regulators across the emerging markets. We have a sustainable banking finance network of banking regulators to build capacity on the regulatory side. And then we're building capacity amongst banks. We've trained, I can't remember the numbers, but hundreds of banks across multi-tens of countries to help them issue. And then we're a buyer and have put together multi-billion-dollar funds with fund managers to get liquidity. So again, you know, we're an investor, but we think systemically. So we're trying to build that market from the supply and the demand side. And plenty of guidance as well. We've issued on green bonds, blue bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, you name it. Look on our website, there's plenty there.
Thank you. And yeah, maybe we can turn to Jean-Pascal and Ali Mohammed to talk about this point about capacity building and training to have that enabling environment for these tools and standards to actually work and be implementable? Thank you.
Merci pour cette question. Effectivement, aujourd'hui, la transition urbaine qui nous impose aujourd'hui de regarder notre façon de construire ou de reconstruire nos territoires est une opportunité. C'est vrai que c'est un problème, c'est un défi où nous disons en Côte d'Ivoire, par exemple, comment construire 8000 logements avec une capacité actuelle qui ne va pas au-delà des 25 000 logements par an. Mais justement, c'est en cela que nous devons être imaginatifs, nous devons être innovants. Et c'est toute une chaîne de valeurs qu'il faut mettre en place. Depuis la formation académique. Aujourd'hui, est-ce que ce n'est pas un secteur dans lequel on doit former plus d'ingénieurs que des cheminements classiques qui certes sont des besoins, mais qui ne répondent pas à l'urgence du moment? Première des choses. Seconde des choses, c'est en termes de projection. Il faut que nous quittions l'urgence, quand bien même nous sommes dans l'urgence. Alors, c'est de commencer à planifier de nouvelles stratégies qui permettent justement de ne pas être à chaque fois en train de recréer la roue, mais plutôt en train de se dire, nous suivons un chemin que nous avons préparé depuis un certain moment. Je vais peut-être distraire un peu ce que je veux dire, mais nous avons des valeurs, des forces internes. Quand vous prenez l'architecture africaine, elle est naturellement aérée. Elle a naturellement de la conservation de la température. Et c'était des choses qui étaient faites depuis des lustres où les femmes étaient aussi actives que les hommes. Et donc aujourd'hui, je profite pour souhaiter à toutes les dames ici présentes bonne journée internationale de vos droits, mais pour dire que c'est justement chacun qui doit pouvoir emmener quelque chose. Et si on veut aujourd'hui maximiser l'autonomisation des femmes, mais justement c'est une opportunité pour leur permettre de créer des richesses, de travailler sur certains matériaux. Et donc c'est un travail d'ensemble que nous sommes appelés à faire. On a deux petites idées aussi à partager avec vous qu'on va essayer de mettre en Côte d'Ivoire. C'est de créer un institut des nouveaux métiers de la ville. Parce que tout ce que nous allons faire, si on veut de la durabilité, c'est d'avoir des hommes qui sont capables aujourd'hui de les mettre en place et demain de permettre à d'autres personnes de le faire. Donc ça aussi, c'est des expériences qu'on peut faire. Mais en même temps, il faut décloisonner la chaîne d'intervention. Que les politiques ne restent pas seulement au niveau de nos États, de nos gouvernements, mais il faut donner la capacité en termes de skilling, la capacité en termes financiers à nos collectivités territoriales, parce que c'est dans les villes que les gens sont mal logés, et c'est pas, excusez-moi, la présidente de la République ou bien dans les bureaux de nos ministères, c'est auprès de ces élus locaux-là. Et donc, il faut vraiment leur donner de pouvoir jouer tout leur rôle. Ça va passer par des transferts de compétences suffisamment forts. Et aussi que les populations se disent ce n'est pas seulement l'affaire des gouvernants, c'est une affaire de tous. J'allais terminer, avec votre permission, par un léger plaidoyer, mais envers nous Africains. Aujourd'hui, il est indéniable que nous ne sommes pas les premiers pollueurs du monde. On demande que ceux qui ont pollué, effectivement, viennent contribuer fortement, mais c'est d'abord notre territoire, c'est d'abord notre pays, c'est d'abord nos générations futures, c'est d'abord nos enfants. Il faut que nous-mêmes, nous nous mettons en avant. Si on a de l'aide, ça sera tant mieux. Mais il faut que nous-mêmes, nous travaillions ensemble sur ces mécanismes-là. Tous ceux qui veulent venir sont les bienvenus chez nous. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. And turning to Ali Mohammed for the last word on capacity building and jobs and creating the enabling environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And appreciate my friend being reminded me to say all women in the world happy Women's Rights Day today. And that's a great day for us. We always remember and keep in mind. To come back to the last question to be answered is we highlight the priority that it has to give support to the local ground is crucial and essential. And as the climate change, those who are invested all over the world, the main industries and factories, as been said, behind the climate change, and we are meeting to claim for loss and damage. And that will have been talking in COP28 in Dubai, and it's a topic which always raises among the international communities whenever they meet. To come back, the priorities which we need still is giving support to job creation. When I say job creation, is you might see so many number of youth who have learned something, but they don't know where to work and where to go to work. And that sometimes result them to decide to immigrate to other countries looking for, better life and jobs. So it has a triangle problem, and when we just close our eyes not to help them to receive on their ground jobs, they decide to immigrate and they bring all their heaviness to other countries, and which they might not know it is weather, climate and behavior and the character of those people living in. So when it's given opportunity to them at their ground, they will do something. Innovation is on the ground, and they will help to participate and be part of their country's, development. So that is why I'm saying job creation. Still, the experience and the knowledge is not enough in terms of the new technology that the world is experiencing these years and recently. We need also to receive those technologies on our ground and educate and teach and train to our youths in order them to be capable to do something on their country. That is the side of job creation. The side of investment also, this is the one I talked recently. It will create a youth to be stable at their, at the first point and stay their homes. And also it will help them to be part of their manpower of their country and to participate in the rebuilding. Somalia has not infrastructures like all over the world. Recently, as you might hear, Somalia lost so many bridges due to the floods which took place November and October and December last year. The floods hit so many districts in Somalia and caused the collapse of so many bridges. You can see people living in that bank, and some people living in this bank, they cannot cross one to another. That causes so many small adolescents and youngest lose their lives when they try to cross the river, because the bridges were lost for the last quarter 4 of last year. And that is also another catastrophe which I'm going to share with you to aware and note, and maybe in the future you might give consideration to help Somalia to rebuild such that bridges. That bridge is mostly built by Netherlands in 1978-75. And now we keep in mind some of international governments, cooperations will help us, but we don't know who exactly they are. For us, still we don't know. But for last time, Netherlands has built for us 1978-75 that bridges, which collapsed quarter 4 of last year. I'm not talking about so many decades before. It is recently quarter 4. So that's all my contribution of today. I have so many issues to talk, but the time is not allowing for me. Thank you once again.
Thank you. So thank you to all of the audience. We've gone over time, so we will wrap up now. But what we've heard today is some huge challenges that governments are facing here, and that we need a real multitude of very nuanced approaches across all of these dimensions that I mentioned at the outset. So, but we do need approaches that bring all parts of this really complex system on the journey to net zero together. So please join me in thanking the panel for this, and I wish you a great remainder of the conference. Thank you. Oh, the closing plenary is just about to start, so if people could please make their way to the main auditorium. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Ella.